Welcome back to We Are the Ioway, a citizen journalist podcast about the Báxoje people, also known as the Ioway, and specifically the citizens of the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska. I'm your host, Olivia Brien, tribal citizen, communications professional, and citizen journalist. This is the fourth episode of We Are the Ioway and is the final episode of the election series featuring interviews with candidates running for positions on the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska's Executive Committee, or EC. As a member of the General Council myself, I'm hosting these conversations to help inform and engage voters. The Iowa Tribe's 2025 election will take place this Saturday, October 18, from 8:30 a.m. until 1:30 p.m. The election for the tribal secretary position is very unique. It is the only contest where both candidates have previous experience on the executive committee. Current and longtime tribal secretary Tony Fee is challenged by former tribal treasurer Elyse Towey for the secretary title. Both candidates were offered the opportunity to be interviewed on this podcast. However, Tony Fee did not participate in an interview. In today's episode, we'll be speaking with Elyse Towey. Meet Elyse.
So, my name is Elyse Towey, and I'm a citizen of the Iowa tribe of Kansas, Nebraska. And I'm running for secretary on October 18th, and I hope to see everybody at the elections.
Communication strategy. How do you plan to improve and streamline communication between the executive committee, tribal government, and tribal citizens?
I believe that communication is the glue that holds everything together. And I think it's very important. And so what I would like to do is have a dedicated communications person who knows the tribe, who is familiar with the tribe, who knows, they know the details. And I know that's going to be hard to do, but it would be somebody that we work with, sort of like when you were doing it, right? That you had the whole EC working with you. And I felt like there was a lot of open communication going back and forth. So my plan is to develop something very similar and to make sure that whatever needs to be posted is posted in a timely manner.
How do you plan to reach tribal citizens without access to or who struggle to use the internet?
I believe that every single citizen of our tribe has the right to have that information in a timely manner. I believe that we need to find different ways of reaching them. For example, using the snail mail, right? We think that's so unused these days, but that's how some people get their information. Making sure that we can, if they do have email, that we're able to email them. Again, I keep referencing back to when you were our communication director, but how you did it, where you had the roundup every Friday. You sent out our flyers, our everything. You sent it out. You put them up. You used a lot of different ways to reach people, and I think that's our responsibility as executive committee members, is to make sure that every single person has that right and has that they're able to get that same information and not just heard it through the grapevine.
Executive committee expectations and accountability. In August, the General Council voted on a new law making all executive committee positions full-time at a minimum. Members of the executive committee will earn wages as set by the General Council, but cannot feasibly hold a second full-time position and fulfill the duties of office. What is your plan regarding your employment if elected?
I do know that at one of our last General Council meetings that the General Council wants our executive committee members to be present. They want them to be on site. They want them to be able to be available to citizens if citizens need information, etc. And, a lot of the work that I do is writing stuff, which when I was working on council before, I was writing grants for the tribe, and I would do that at night. And so if I do continue with my job at this point, it's not something that has to be done during the day. I can do the writing at night, which is something I plan to do.
Imagine a colleague decides not to follow this tribal law. How will you ensure the law is enforced?
First of all, I'd need to know more about it. For example, if somebody was working another 9 to 5 job while they should be working for the tribe, during those time periods. But if it was something that was interfering with their ability to serve the people the way that people deserve to be treated and served, I would bring that to council and have a discussion. And so that everybody's there, everybody would be on the same page.
Leadership experience. Describe your leadership and communication style during your time on the executive committee. How did you learn and grow as a leader during that time and since then?
So I just think, as a leader, I felt sort of adrift. I didn't know where my leadership was supposed to focus on. I'm not making excuses. This is just how it happened, right? And and there was a lot going on. We had COVID started. We had never had a pandemic, in our recent history. I have never lived through one. I don't think you have either. And it was really sort of a scary situation for us because trying to find things to make sure that our tribal citizens had what they needed, that they had masks, that they had hand sanitizer, that we could get them vaccinations, those type of things. So I'm not faulting anybody because we were all working very long hours and we were working very hard to try to find these things. And we weren't getting any direction from the US government. They would say, here's this money for the CARES Act. They didn't tell us it has to be spent this way, that way, or that way. They didn't tell us that for almost a year later. So, but I felt like we did as well as we could during that point. But with my leadership and my communication, I don't feel like I lived up to my potential when I was on tribal council. In the past, 2, 3 years, I've done a lot of work. I was diagnosed with ADHD about a year and a half ago. And so I sometimes feel like when prior to starting some medication for my ADHD, um, the only word that comes to my mind is almost feral, And so, I also had to do a lot of other work, other ways, on myself and really think about what I wanted to do to represent my people. Because I didn't want it to be the status quo, what we had been doing all along, because it's not working anymore. And so I did learn certain things. I learned stuff about myself. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about our people, right? I learned about how, because there are people up here that are so good and so giving that it makes my heart ache, but they're sometimes not allowed to act on what they want to act on. And it's just because this is a small community. I'm not pointing fingers anywhere. It's just that's what happens in small communities. It's just a different type of lifestyle. But I have done a lot of work and one thing for sure, I've learned the pause. And so one thing is that before I would I would just jump right in. But now I've learned in the past 2 or 3 years that it's really more beneficial to take a pause before talking, gather your thoughts, um, uh, you know, know how you're going to react. Or if you're going to react a certain way, take that pause to maybe sort of look at how you're reacting and why. It doesn't have to be a whole afternoon project. It could be just a split moment. And, you know, and, and truly that has really changed my life in many ways. And so I'm looking forward to this next round on tribal council.
Transparency. According to our Constitution and bylaws, Article 12, Section 3, all meetings of the Executive Committee shall be open to tribal members. Ideally, the General Council would be notified of all EC meetings so they have the opportunity to attend. While it may not always be possible for emergency meetings, for example, I'd personally appreciate notice whenever possible. How will you ensure tribal members are informed about any meetings held outside of the regularly scheduled Executive Committee meetings held weekly on Wednesdays?
I believe that we should post on our social media right away when we know we're going to have a meeting that has not been scheduled. But I also believe that sometimes meetings happen and we don't have time to do things like that. But if we do, we should make every effort we can to reach every person, meaning putting up flyers, putting social media, sending emails, and use what tools we have to ensure that people have the right to attend those meetings.
Tribal law has not been followed regarding publishing meeting minutes and video recordings on the members area for General Council and Executive Committee meetings. Often, members of the General Council have problems accessing tribal records. How will you improve access to meeting minutes, policy documents, and other records for tribal citizens?
I know at this time, when people want to see certain information, they have to come into the office. I've been told by many people that they set up appointments, they get there, and the person they're supposed to meet with is just not there. So I think it's very, very important for us not to waste our citizens' time. If they make an appointment with us, we need to be there. We need to be available to them. Um, Granted, there are times that we will be unable to because there may be, an EC meeting or something like that, or another meeting. But if we make an appointment with somebody, we need to follow through and keep that appointment and be there, even if they're late, you know. And o- other than that, what I'd like to do is make sure that everybody, it's posted everywhere we can post it, right? About all these things. We have a members area now, which is very healthy, and it has a lot of information in it that I think is helping people feel more comfortable being a tribal citizen.
Enrollment and confidentiality.
Accurate tribal membership records are necessary for success. We must know who our people are and how to reach them. How do you plan to update and improve our enrollment records?
I'm not familiar with how they're run right now. I don't know how they're set up. I'm not privy to any of that information. So I don't feel like I can actually answer that question until I get into the office and I see what's available and what we can do. But I do know that some tribes do things like make family trees for people, right? And it's right there in the programming that is used, they use. And that really helps people, especially when they're looking for their relatives. And I would like to see something like that put into our whatever program we're using so that it's easier for people that don't have those connections to find those connections.
Much of the information handled by the Secretary is confidential or sensitive. How do you plan to protect confidential or sensitive information? How will you do so while maintaining appropriate records?
I have worked in domestic violence and sexual assault prevention for the past 20 plus years, close to 25 years. And in doing so, the federal grant money that we received stipulated that we had to keep confidentiality, especially, um, with our documents, et cetera. And so I'm used to doing that. That's how I work. I work in a bubble of confidentiality until I need to talk to other people about that information. And I don't mean information that are in files. I mean just any information, Um, and because I think that, keeping everything confidential has to be one of the number one priorities because we already know that this is a small community. Um, it's sort of like the telephone game, right? Somebody talks one thing and then, 10 down, it's a totally different story. And I don't want those kind of things to happen because this has to do with the tribe and with our ability to govern our nation.
Community sourced questions. The following questions were drawn from comments and suggestions on Facebook and direct conversations with tribal members. This final selection represents key issues raised by our community. Culture. Without our language and our culture, we cease to exist as Ioway people. What are your plans to support cultural initiatives?
I think our language is one of the most important things for us as a people. And I agree without our language, we cease to exist. And Lance and I talked about this over and over and over again, just trying to figure out the best ways and the easiest ways for people to connect with language. So yes, I am going to support every cultural initiative that comes through. I also want to put a spotlight on our people who are doing these amazing things already. They're on the ground, right? They're Shelby, is making these amazing things. They have, but then they're including the community, which is what we should do with almost everything we do. And Brett, the I don't know if you had a chance to walk. People have had a chance to walk back in our Restoring the Prairie, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's full of life, and it's just a good place to feel good in if you need that. Our missions, I believe they're being underused. I think we need to look for grants more strategically. I think we need to be more aggressive about looking for grants for that. And I believe with the right funding, we can make good use out of those to tell our story of who we are, to have places that we can get together for language classes, for medicine bag making, those type of things. It really does my heart a lot of good to see that our people are getting involved in that and more involved in our language also. I try to use 5 words a day from our language, even if it's just talking to my dog, and I just think it's awesome. And I fully back keeping our culture intact, keeping it strong, and keeping it real.
Sovereignty. What does sovereignty mean to you?
Sovereignty means to me the power of our people. It means that we are able to make the decisions we need to make for our people, including our cultural aspects, including our language, including our government, including every single thing. With sovereignty, that's our power. That's our place as Native American people. And that's what we need to get strong. We need to ensure that our people understand what sovereignty is.
Technology. The General Counsel has recently passed various laws regarding executive committee transparency. How do you see us utilizing technology to meet General Counsel expectations regarding meetings? How do you see us using technology in the future to report on the standings of our various business ventures?
So I believe that technology is our friend, and I believe that we should be using it to every extent that we can. That, for example, in, council meetings, very easily just have it on where it's streamed as a video, right? And people can watch it from their own homes. It can be posted in the members site. It can be watched at a later time, because we also have the executive committee can go into an executive meeting so that those parts aren't talked about to everybody until we're ready, and everything's ready and mapped out to be talked about. But I believe that we should be using technology. I mean, it's silly that we don't. This is not the 1950s, it's 2025, and we should use everything available to us. We should, our general council meetings can be taped also and played in the in the member section. We can use everything like that. I think a lot of times it's, we have people come here, and a lot of people come from quite far away, and they come here and they leave. And I've heard in the past that they feel like it was a waste of time because it's not what they wanted to hear is not what's being presented. And I think it's because we don't, we're getting together more often, but we still don't have, I think people have a lot to say these days, and I think they should be able to say it. And I think by posting these meetings, even board meetings, right? Even board meetings, it keeps everybody on the up and up, and it allows us to be able to feel more of a tribal community. Because right now we have people all across the world. We have citizens that live in Japan. We have citizens that live in other countries. And, and I think those people have just as much right to hear the information that we hear during those meetings. And with the technology we have today, there's no excuse not to be using it. I just want to thank everybody who's taking the time to listen to these podcasts that Olivia has produced. I also want to thank Olivia for doing this, because I think this is just another thing that we need to get the information out there that we as tribal citizens deserve and need. And that, you know, when we do things like this, it takes away where it's not just a popularity contest, where it's not just, well, because that's my cousin, I'm going to vote for him or her. What it does is it allows people to get to know who we are and what we believe in, and so that they maybe feel more comfortable about approaching us with extra questions they might have.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Elyse.
I appreciate this, Olivia. I am so proud of you that you have taken the initiative to do this, and you're making it available to everybody who is running, but also all of our tribal citizens. We need to keep up with our technology. We need to give our citizens more. We need to do better. But, I just want to say thank you to everybody that takes the time to watch these videos. And I want to say thank you to those who, are going to make that trek up here to the reservation for our elections, which are October 18th. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for the 4th episode of We Are the Ioway and the final episode in the special election series. Tribal elections will take place on Saturday, October 18 from 8:30 a.m. until 1:30 p.m. I hope this series helps you make educated choices when you cast your ballot this Saturday. Thank you to all who chose to take the opportunity to speak with our listeners and our community. Torigun, or until next time. And thank you for listening to We Are the Ioway.